Urban Explorer of Reddit, what was your I bet fo story? Was exploring an abandoned TB hospital. Heard a sound that sounded a lot like a homeless person snoring. It took a while for my friends and I to work up the courage to go in the room where we heard it. But we were rewarded with the sight of a vulture's nest. When me and my friends were young, we lived in a trailer park community in a bad part of Phoenix. But we loved exploring anyway. We found a large old storm drain behind our community covered in graffiti and weeds and we decided to explore. Walking in with mini flashlights we kept seeing spots of blood and more strange graffiti. After about 30-ish minutes we started hearing tapping. We got scared and started to walk back out. When we noticed it seemed to be following us we ran like our lives depended on it. Few weeks after that our community manager discovered a body near the entrance of the storm drain. That was the last of our exploring. I was taking a look at some of those massive smokestacks in an abandoned factory and I heard a radio squelch. That's time to go. Used to do security at a racetrack at night and I'd usually hit the monitor button on my radio, which turns off the squelch so you can listen to the channel unfiltered or pretty much pure static. Every so often so people would know I was nearby and I wouldn't have to deal with them. Unless they were supposed to be there. No really scary ones other than random bums yelling and stuff. But there were a couple of good encounters. 1. Messing around in the outskirts of a train yard taking pics of old train cars and stuff. Ran into I guess a mechanic or maintenance worker or something who ended up being super cool and started up and pulled a locomotive out of the shed for us. 2. In an old abandoned mining site somewhere I came around the side of a big machine thing and ran into a homeless dude living in a tent. He also turned out to be cool. We gave him some of our food and sat around for a while talking. I was inside an abandoned brewery, looking at the old equipment. I climbed a lot of stairs and found a door with scribbles of graffiti on it. Among them the sentences "Occident look down" and "Ossa commit suicide here." We were about 4 stories off the ground at this point but my curiosity was killing me. I opened the door. Nothing. No stairs or balcony or fence. The door was on the wall of the building and opened into thin air. And you absolutely would have been killed, painfully, had you fallen out. Edit. I posted photos of the graffiti view down. I convinced a group of about 5 or so of my friends to go with me into this old house that was in an odd sort of industrial area. Like on one of those service roads next to a highway. The only way in was to go through the basement and through a hole in the wall at the top of the stairs. After exploring for a while I thought I'd do a scout mission for fun that involved me just walking around the house to check for cops. Well, what do you know? There were cop cars just pulling into the street with sirens on that were pulling into the restaurant next door. Someone probably reported us. The exit was on the other side of the house from the cops. I quickly called up to the others to climb back out and we somehow managed. In a building I found the basement. Then the sub-basement. It was dark. Heard a sound. Then an animal running sound. And dogs barking. I booked it back up the stairs and closed the fire door and gtfo. Speaking to some urbex mentors they explained if you hear dogs or see them, to not go in the area as it's probably used for a drug lab. As a teen I used to break into an old aluminum factory a lot. Led who was with me at the time up a staircase winding around pill-shaped vats with small flap lids. 4 flights up we start seeing feathers. Then a dead bird. Then a pile of dead birds, with no open ceiling where they could have flown in. We turn around and he stops me. Says he saw some dust fall and we notice the lid on the vat next to us is open. There were no noises aside from us which was somehow comforting. Still never went back after that. Came upon an active shooting gallery in a tunnel one time. I noped TF out of there in a hurry. Spooky cement tunnel that seems to lead underground. Very dark and echoes go on for ages. We had no clue what it was. Didn't seem to be any kind of drainage tunnel because it was square bone dry and out in an open field. There are definitely some old bomb shelters and missile silos on our area that are out of commission. So we decided to take a look. Only about 20 yards and the light from outside starts really fading behind us. Someone takes out a flashlight and we start seeing bare human footprints on the ground leading deeper into the dark. None leaving. We skedaddled. Oh, I've had my share of things that made me nope out. Here's just a few. Semicolon. 1. Found a gas leak in an abandoned house that had been building up for years a couple weeks ago. IGTFO. But not before finishing taking the photos I wanted with extreme caution. That one I reported to the cops, as it's classified as the kind of hazard in the urbex community that supersedes discretion. Semicolon. 2. Ran into the security guard doing an unexpected interior patrol. He definitely knew we were there, so we had to book it for the tree line before he could get the cops out there to search. Semicolon. 3. Some homeless dude chucking cans and bottles out the 5th story window of an old factory my friend and I were poking around to scare us off. We took a hint and left. Semicolon. 4. Tripped a motion detecting camera in the basement of an abandoned building and had to bail. I know for a fact they got a full face photo of me staring directly into the camera with shock, but I never heard anything more about it. Went exploring in an old textile mill in rural Alabama. It was easy enough to hide your car for parking, and you could even pull your car onto the site if you had 4-wheel drive. We went often and one time parked right in the middle of the mill's back lot and decided to climb the ladders to the roof. Once we got to the roof the sun started setting, so we got our headlamps ready, watched the sunset, and decided to head back down from the roof. As we're walking to the ladder my car alarm down below starts going off. And immediately from the rooftop across from us someone flashed a flashlight at us, but they never said a thing. I was way too nervous about my car being stolen to really care about the other person, but they didn't chase us. Yell. Nothing. They just kept their light on us so that we could never see them and followed us with their light till we got into the car and left. I never went back after that. It's torn down now. Less Osai urban but sharing anyway. I was camping in BC with my GF at the time and her dog. Had a couple of rough looking people who were the only other people in the area we were camping, but it was late so we set up and thought nothing of it. Guy wanders over while we're in our tent. Can hear him outside and dog is barking at this point. I get out and ask what he's doing and he says he just wanted to pet the dog. This is at like midnight. Told him we were settling in etc. Guy wanders off without replying at all to what I'd said. Woke up the next morning to what looked to me like a single 9mm bullet sitting upright on our site's picnic table. And a happy face made with sticks and rocks on the bench part of the table below it. Maybe it was just a Thai joke. But we sure as didn't stay around to find out. I did lots in the UK a few years back. Denby Asylum in general just made me note the out. That place was scary. My friend did that and took pics. He found a wardrobe in the basement that had a chair in it that looked as though they'd made someone sit in the wardrobe. I was exploring when I noticed some dude trailing me. I was saved by a bus driver, who noticed me and opened the door as he passed by me. I spent a lot of years super into urban exploration hoping something would make me nope out. It happened a lot and it was always the same thing. The cops. There was an abandoned house down the road from my high school that was still filled with stuff. Some friends and I would hang out in there from time to time. There was a point where the house got boarded up and we didn't go into it for a while. Jump to a few months later, and one of my friends told me he found a way inside. After a couple more weeks I went to the house with one friend to check it out again and relive some memories. When we got there, it was clear something bad had taken place. The stuff in the house was thrown all over the place. Any kind of dish from the kitchen was smashed on the floor. When we looked at the stairs to the second floor we both got the worst feeling. Like we would find something terrible if we went up there. So we got the hell out of there. After a couple more months, the house was demolished. Sort of urban exploring I guess. When I was at Chicago they were renovating some of the Green Line stations and a friend and I would jump the turnstiles at the station across from our building at night to get high and watch the trains. Day 2 of the station being closed, and one of the conductors saw us and actually stopped, so we got on with only one other person in the car, thinking it'd be fun to just ride it until it came back. It's pretty late, and after a few minutes we realized the homeless looking guy sitting at the other end of the car isn't actually masturbating. He's cleaning a gun. Got off only to realize it was an Ashland 63rd bound train and had no idea where TF we were. To this day neither of us remember how we made it home. Church Road. The abandoned house with religious pamphlets strewn about. We turn around and an old man is standing there behind us all of a sudden. Not shouting at us to leave, just staring off through us. Down. Needless to say we GTFO there ASAP. My friends and I explored an abandoned grain factory in Johnson City, TN. It's been torn down now, but it was massive. Stories upon stories. It was like 11 PM and pitch black in there. And we had crappy little flashlights. We were getting this horrible smell, like death, but kept exploring like dumbasses. We went all the way to the top floor and discovered it was a, currently, empty heroin den. Complete with spoons and definitely scrammed at that point. Not urban, but I was driving down a country road once north of Puerto Vallarta and looked down the road to the left. There was a lightly wooded area with maybe 100 people having a family type gathering. Spread around the trees and on the road were many hard looking guys in black uniforms and automatic looking rifles. We just kept going. The cartels need downtime too, I guess. An old primary school that I was at for a few years before a new one opened. Me and a few friends had been before but never actually went into the place as one of us was worried. One day I decided to go in by myself to see it. The only way in was a very small window that was almost impossible to see through as the hallway was so dark. I brought a flashlight and went into the place. I was worried because I started hearing what sounded like footsteps coming from the old lunch hall. I saw an outline of what seemed like another person and a flashlight pointed at me. A person shouted "Hey" at me, and that's probably the fastest I've ever ran as a 10-year-old lol. The story makes me laugh a lot now, but for weeks I was terrified and curious at the same time. The place has since been fully boarded up for too many people clearly going into the place. I was exploring the abandoned hospital at night when I see a light shining down the corridor just on my left. When I saw that, I started to run back when I hear the loudest, most distorted laughter ever. Then I heard a man screaming, then the sound of something breaking. I learned a few days later that it was my friend who knew I was going to be there alone and he wanted to scare me. The screaming man was actually coming from the YT video on the SCP Bone Breaker. Edit. The address for the hospital is 28 bis Rue de la Solitude, 72,000 Le Mans. Not urban, but in Virginia when I first started to hike, me and my buddy went hiking and walked too far and ended up off trail and walked for a while thinking it's the long way back. The map showed it did loop. Ended thinking let's ask someone. And saw shack off the trail. As we got closer, saw a Nazi flag from outside the window. Given I'm brown and my buddy was Asian, we figured now. Was exploring the basement of this really cool old Victorian mansion. Came across a kind of alarmingly large den of snakes. I doubt they were anything dangerous, but they started looking at me and slithering around, so I politely apologized for invading their home and noped the out of there. I was walking back home and took a short break to lean on a corner of a grocery store. Kind of a sketchy area of Queens. But I felt safe walking with a few friends. The parking lot entrance was along the edge we were leaning on. All of a sudden, a totally blacked out fancy sedan pulls into the entrance, but stops right in front of us. At the same moment, a tall man in a suit came walking from around the corner, basically behind us, and gives us all a terrifying look. Like we need to leave. As the man opens the back door to get in, the passenger side window opens and we see the face of two oldish men staring at us with a chilling look. Without missing a beat or even looking at each other, we quickly stood straight and rushed away. We fast walked away and said nothing until we got to the next block. We have no idea what we saw, but I don't think we were supposed to. The coldness felt from the stares we got were unlike anything I've experienced. Edit. Most of the time it's cops or security. But there was one time it was something else. My friend and I were exploring an abandoned insane asylum. We were in the underground tunnels that stretched as far as our flashlights could shine. The echoing is unreal down there, so we would stop every 30 feet or so to let the echoes die down so we knew we were alone. The one time we stopped, the echoes died down and then we heard what sounded like an elevator coming to the ground floor. There were no elevators in the building and no power anyway. We looked at each other and bailed. This thread. I was exploring an old office house of a slaughterhouse. While I was in there, my sister was exploring an abandoned mental institution near where we live and she found a basement with no graffiti or anything. The place hadn't been used for decades. We were 17-year-old girls and decided to climb into the first story window of the abandoned psychiatric facility in our city. My friend was a former cheerleader and lifted me up to the window and I climbed in, with the intention of securing a rope for her to use to climb. Within my cursory glance to find something stable, I found evidence of squatters, drug use, something that looked like dried blood and a very dead rat stabbed into the old desk in the room. Heard someone in the distance whispering too, and realized I was unarmed and scrawny and alone and stupid. Promptly leapt back out the window, jammed both my ankles on landing and we hightailed it out of there. And that was the end of urban exploring. I was in an abandoned insane asylum and crawled in a window on the second story to let my friends in downstairs. The building was huge and so I was having a hard time finding the stairwells. I saw a flash of light at the end of a really long hallway and so assumed my friends had gotten in somehow and so started running that way. I ran down past 20+ open doors to get to the end only to find a mirror that my light had reflected off of and a dead-end hall. Felt eerily alone and knew I had to go back alone past all those rooms I had sprinted past. Me and my friend were going to explore a large farmland that was private property. We were about to enter a large paddock until I saw a large sign saying something along the lines of "Beware bull." I was in Athens, Greece. It was my first time traveling alone in a foreign country. I didn't know that people basically desert the streets midday. I walked into a shop just off the plaza. I didn't realize the store was empty and the owner locked the door behind me. I looked around for a bit then tried to leave, but he blocked the way. I am damn lucky he didn't physically attack me. He finally opened the door. Lesson learned. My urban exploring isn't all that urban as I live in Montana and explore mostly abandoned homesteads. There is almost a guarantee that there will be one if not two dead animals and a car that looks like it would still run if not for rust and dirt. I have run into one guy that came flying up in a pickup truck with a crowbar. Another time I came in to find a not so dead and rather red off raccoon. I had spent an hour or so scoping out a large construction site in my local city. Other sites I had done in the city didn't have security guards. And while I suspected this one might, I still thought I would give it the old college try. I squeeze myself through the gate and take maybe 5 steps before I see a security guard about 30 yards away just now making his rounds. I don't think he saw me, but I waved at him. Turned around. Waved at him. That's the most Canada thing I've ever heard. In Al-Azad Air Base, Iraq, my unit inherited this massive hangar thing that was backed up to a few old bunkers. They were these huge pyramids protruding from the sand. I didn't have much going on one night so I was skulking around. I found an air vent on top. I kicked out the screen and the duct led to a ladder that went way down. A Mission Impossible some chem lights and climbed down. It was full of spent brass and pieces of weapons. I found a door that had all the trappings of an officer's office. In the desk I found a diary, turned out to be the minutes of several years of party meetings, and a flag. Proud of my new loot. I found another small closet. I opened the door and it was floor to ceiling UXO. Everything from grenades to those packages that hold C4 to mortar rounds. Tons of it, and it was all very obviously old as. I shot up that ladder like I was being shot at. Chem lights in hand. I put the vent back on and cartoon casual whistle walked the home. In an old mill. Saw a hole in the floor and went back. I was exploring this abandoned aqueduct called the Secret Sidewalk that is supposed to be in the territory of this local creepypasta type character called the White Witch of Niles. Out of the dark I heard the loudest most blood-curdling female scream that also sounded masculine kinda. Couldn't even play it cool for my date. Froze me in my tracks and we dipped before we even got close to the cool parts. Pretty sure I was followed by a mountain lion there on another occasion. Edit. Old abandoned army barracks at the end of my rural dead-end street. It was up on posts about 10 feet tall with one stairway with no rail leading to an open doorway. I think they had vehicles parked underneath. I'm alone and start up the steps. About step number 4-5. A gigantic king owl comes swooping out of the doorway, right at me. I dove off the steps into the tall weeds. Check the sky. Then mope the out of there, never to return. About 7 years ago. I found an abandoned cemetery on the south coast of NSW, Australia. Really creepy and overgrown off a side road. A few of the headstones were fire damaged. Apparently, this place dates back to the 1920s 1930s, based on the dates on the headstones. Anyway, I decided to explore this in the very late afternoon. About 6:37 PM. I was wandering around the place taking photos with a DSLR and a very scruffy bearded guy comes up to me to ask what I'm doing there. Yes, at the time I was a student and drove a really sketchy looking 2000 Toyota Camry. And it was very conspicuously parked on the side of the road. But this guy was riding a pushy on an 80km/h road and reeked of alcohol and could barely talk. I think he was concerned about vandalism because some arsonists had damaged some of the headstones at some point. I checked later and I'm 99% sure I was on public land. I didn't argue though. I was an avid urban explorer for most of my teenage and young adult life. Construction cranes. Abandoned buildings. Buildings in operation. You name it. My goal was always to get where I shouldn't be. The views were unreal. My buddies and I had been scouting an abandoned factory on the side of the highway for a few weeks. Everything seemed normal the day of. We pulled up and stashed our bikes, making sure we had an easy access point in case the cops showed up. Everything was going great for all of 2 minutes before we turn a corner and find ourselves staring at a drug deal that I can only compare to the opening scene in The Dark Knight. Dogs. Assault weapons. And a lot of angry men. We ran fast. Just as we were picking up our bikes. One guy ran after us and fired a shot. We were lucky to get away with our lives and I was pretty spooked for a while after that. TLDR. We were exploring an abandoned factory and walked into an armed drug deal.